Hi there and Happy New Year. I am Patrick from Toomey Travel. I expect many of you know me and I have been meaning to do this video for a couple of weeks now. So first of all, Happy New Year, happy 2025. I certainly hope this is a healthy, happy and safe year for everyone around the world. A couple of weeks ago, I put out a call both on Facebook and YouTube here asking and Instagram. I just ask you for your travel questions. So as many of you know, I travel the world. Now I live right here in Banff National Park and I thought it'd be fun to be outside to do this little video. I did receive just dozens and dozens of questions, so I've tried to narrow it down. This could be an easy part one of a multi-part Q&A series. It kind of makes sense. I do travel consulting, by the way. And so for many of you who wrote in and asked me about travel to specific places, when it's one question or two questions, I'm always happy to answer, or someone I know will answer. Otherwise, we do a longer, 1 hour, 2 hour consulting where we can help you plan your travel for a reasonable fee. The advantage to that, just as a side note, is that we're not making money off anything else. So we're giving you just the best possible advice. So as that is noted, someone asked, am I tired? And I think no is the answer now, although if you asked me that about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I'd probably say yes. So I really said the last 2 years, but really if I go back about 3 years, I've been traveling extensively. And obviously living out here in the national park, I love living here, but it's usually an extra step of travel, right? It takes me at least an hour and a half to get to the airport in Calgary and carry on, and very few direct flights for me around the world. So that's the nature of the beast. But no, I'm not that tired. And it comes to one of those questions that comes up so much about travel and health. And that is really, I'm finding as I get older, I tend to pad on a couple of days to trips. You don't need to if you're taking a package holiday, but I find because I'm working, I need to fly out a bit earlier and just let myself recover. I'm finding jet lag harder and harder, not easier and easier. I have no magic trick. People have told me so many different things over the years. I find that if I can eat really lightly, drink lots of water, get to the new place, have a little nap, and then exercise, but it still takes me a few days. That's just the kind of person I am. I've actually, a lot of times now when I wake up in the middle of the night, I give up. Recently, a couple of months ago, I flew to Hong Kong. Loved going there. I was actually doing a trip to Japan, but I thought it'd be fun to catch up with Hong Kong. And so when I woke up at 2 a.m., I went out and did 10,000 steps from like 2 to 4 a.m. And of course, nice warm place, beautiful reflections of lights, went back, fall asleep a bit, and I was right within a couple of days. So to each their own. Some people find it harder going east, some people find it harder going west, and then it depends on the time zones. I like going north-south because even though the trips down to South America can be 12 hours of travel, it's maybe a 1 hour time change. So, that's all different elements. Another thing I like to mention though, is when you go to a country where the water is safe, please drink the tap water. Bring a bottle that you can fill back up. Remember that the bottled water industry is not in the water business. It's in the plastic business. And you can travel to so many places around the world where you just see these piles of plastic bottles. So it is something I feel quite ethical about. Of course, there's some places that you don't have a choice and you have to work around that, of course. But when you do, and it's easy to check, water here is perfectly safe. All of Western Europe, the States, I drink the water just about anywhere unless there's a warning. So many places. So it's not nearly as dangerous as people make it out to be. So all that said, I something like 180 plus flights over the last couple of years. I put a little cheat sheet of questions that people asked me, the ones that I put it down to. But someone asked, do I have a trick for cheap flights? That is a great question. First of all, I think air miles should come with the kind of same warnings that you get on cigarettes or alcohol, that they can be addictive. So I'm addicted to air miles. But living where I do, I have very few choices when it comes to flying. There's 2 national carriers in this country and then a smattering of others that come and go. And so I don't have the options that people do in certainly lots of parts of Europe with the low-cost carriers, different parts of the world. So there are fewer options for me. So rather than trying to find a real deal on flights, I actually have hunkered down on the alliance that's most useful for me. Now, it doesn't have to be the most useful one for you. So obviously in this country, you have WestJet and Air Canada. Where I fly, Air Canada is generally more useful, although I'm not giving them a shout out anymore over any other company. but they have enough partnerships for me that I can focus a lot of my spending into one area. And so what I tend to look at is the scale, because now there's so many levels where you can purchase an airline ticket. And the very cheapest one, I mean, now they're migrating to no carry-on luggage. That's an extra fee. So it's so easy to look at that ticket price. And I think governments need to legislate around this even more. Just like, as a side note, Canada and the States particularly, I would love to have tax and service included in the posted price of anything. It makes budgeting so much easier. And that is a legislative point, so have a talk to your regional or national members of parliament or Congress or whomever one talks to try and bring something about. But when it comes to buying your flights, my best piece of advice is don't buy through the online travel agencies. I do like them, I do use some of them, and I want to get into that, but I will look at them perhaps to see who flies where, but I always book directly with the airline. Now, I always do so because if you have a problem, and problems happen a lot, and there's a lot of cancellations, and there's strikes, and there's weather delays, and all the things, if you booked straight with the airline, then the airline deals with your issue. And then if you can avoid that absolute cheapest fare, go up a couple of steps, then you might have a chance of an upgrade. But set that aside. Your checked bag is counted in, your carry-on, and you have some ability, if your plans change, not to lose the entire thing. So that's how I look at it. Now, if I were standing talking to you from the UK or from Central Europe or something, I would maybe give a whole different talk about a lot of the budget airlines. One of the examples we talk a lot about is Ryanair, which is generally a very unpleasant travel experience. But that said, you can get absolutely everywhere for very little money, but you always have to audit the airports. They'll say they're flying into Rome, but it's not the same airport that all the other airlines are. So if you happen to be connecting, it's really important to understand that. So it's always a bit of an audit on the map. So I wanted to offer that. I will now come to the side point of these online travel agencies. So I quite like Expedia because generally I can see a price. Other people have other favorites, but I have a real struggle with Airbnb, and that's not for their product, and same with Vrbo. It's not their product. It's the fact that living where I do, we don't really have Airbnb here in the national park because there's a need to reside requirement. We cannot grow out of our boundaries. That's important environmentally, specifically here. But there was an article I read years ago from Telluride in Colorado, beautiful mountain ski town, and it was entitled "How Airbnb Killed the Mountain Town." And that's because the accommodation where all of us workers should be living has now been turned into Airbnb. So suddenly, if you want to go to the local coffee shop, or you want fast food, slow food, the whole thing, where are those people meant to live? This is a major, major crisis. That's what hotels are for, and true B&Bs, the true family that then gets the right to rent out a unit in their house. Beautiful thing and a great cultural experience. And also it's a great way of developing tourism in areas. But when whole building blocks in places with very limited, very expensive accommodation get handed over for these rentals, and it means the locals have nowhere to live, and that just erodes both the local cultural experience and the tourist experience. So it's a struggle I have there. Another one that I have a huge struggle with continuously is Booking.com. I think that they are not particularly honest about extra fees. I don't think they audit, so my fingers are local. I don't think they audit their products. Again and again and again, I hear of problems with them. And so that is another crisis that I just am not a fan of. And interestingly, just a couple of months ago, I ran a trip to Japan. It was probably, of all the trips that we have as Tumi Travel, in fact, I should turn this around, shouldn't I? As Tumi Travel have done in the last few years, I was let down by the agent because I had booked specifically on that particular tour a 4-star standard. Now I changed standards according to budget, destination, location, all these things. And the agent said, yep, they're all 4-star hotels except one. And then when I stayed at all of them, they were all 3-star hotels. And when I wrote after about Hotel 4, I said, hold on. I said, we use Booking.com. So Booking.com just seems to throw an extra star onto products. And so here I am publicly showing my displeasure with that. So, another side note. Now, group travel or individual travel. I love that. I love both, but obviously I organize group travel. That's what I do principally for a living, not just. I mean, I do the virtual tours, I do lectures, and I'm part of a big network of guides. In fact, my son guides with us now when he's not at university, of course. So it's a bigger thing, but I love group travel in all its forms. So I think the real question is, do you want to travel in a small group or a big group? As a side note to that question, several people asked, well, how do they see all the tours I'm doing? And that is kind of a tough question. On our website, we do list them. And I sometimes list them on behalf of other people, colleagues. But really, 80% of what I do now is just custom. So people express an interest in a place, I put it together. Usually you want to see 6 to 12 people, depending on the destination. And then when I put it out to our broader public, more people will sign on. And then we set it up. Sometimes I do absolutely everything directly. Sometimes, on the other hand, I use a local agent, and that can be for licensing reasons. It could be for knowledge, right? If I'm leading the tour absolutely myself, it's either a place I know very well or I will engage local guidance, right? Seems like a fair deal. So true individual travel, I love as well. And this goes right back. You know, I'm a little bit older than I used to be. There's my bike and there's the town of Banff in the background. But I started out backpacking on very, very tight budgets way back, even before university. Now, obviously, I can stay in better places. And it's not that I don't love every now and then that fancy 5-star experience, but I much prefer a nice, comfortable 3-star accommodation right in the center of a community when there's things to see. If it's the outdoor experience, then that's a different conversation. So it's always designing your travel around what your needs are. But what I will say, and a number of years ago, the first time I ever traveled to Japan, at the end of the trip, and I went there with my son and we had the rail pass and had a really good trip. But at the end of that trip, I wrote a piece called an ode to tours. And it was because after 2.5 weeks or something in Japan, I felt like I had wasted so much time with us just traveling with our backpacks because I didn't know it well enough that any travel day, the whole day was blown working out where to go and what to do. The advantage to some sort of a group travel is you arrive into X airport or train station or bus station or whatever, and literally someone knowledgeable and 99% of the time friendly and helpful will say, hey, you've got 3 hours this afternoon. You might want to see that, that, and that. And boom, you're using your time. So what sometimes seems more expensive at the beginning is actually fantastic value and time efficient. And for people who are particularly still working or don't want to be away from home for more than 10, 12, even 14 days, what a great way to travel. And so group travel, the other thing I found over the years, and I've done tours from everything from very small groups to 40, well, I think even 53 I once had, is the friendships people make while traveling and the experience that comes along with it. So that's just a big conversation, but don't be afraid of group travel and don't think there's only one way. You know, over the years, I've had people say to me, oh, I'm a real traveler. Well, what does that mean? Now, there's ethical travel, which I try and focus on all the time. I do my best to spend money locally. I'm not afraid of chains and everything, but I try to support local services, local restaurants, local guides, all that sort of thing. But there is unethical travel, of course, and that's why you won't see us offering tours to places that are known for, well, abuse towards women or children and that sort of thing. That's, and that is out there. Now, how has the world changed in travel since COVID? Well, just coming back to where I live here in Banff, during the first year of the pandemic, our unemployment here, are you ready for this? Was 79%. The highest unemployment in Canada because it's all tourism. We're all hotels, national park, everything closed down. Boom. And we even had controls coming into town. Now, our federal government really came through for us, gave great support, and we were able to start up again quite well after. So that was wonderful. But, so we went from zero to suddenly everything taking off. But I'd like to give one good example. I ran a tour, it'll be 3 years in spring, to Spain. And that was when I still had to get a COVID test to fly, and there were QR codes to get in the countries. Well, I had flown over to Heathrow, spent a couple of days in London, and then I was flying to Barcelona. And again, coming back to the air miles, I bought a flight that went down through Lisbon because it was a partner airline with my alliance that I use. And so when I went to Heathrow to check in for my flight to Lisbon onto Barcelona, suddenly it turned out the Portuguese government did not accept vaccinations that were given out of the European Union, even though they were the same vaccines. So fortunately, I had been to the airport early enough, and I had to get a rush test. Who knows if it was even real, but I tested negative, and I was able to connect for 45 minutes through Lisbon. Now, that all happened, got to Barcelona, famous city, one of the cities that's actually is banning Airbnb actually for quality of life, and this will come into play. Met my group, many of them I knew, and lovely people, and they were excited to travel. And we went out, and the next day on the city tour, we were in Sagrada Familia, the famous church. And whilst we were there in the church, I realized we were pretty much the only people there. I mean, we literally had this world famous site to ourselves. Now, I was back in Spain in March this year. I didn't get to Barcelona, but in Seville, where the famous Moorish tower is, right by the cathedral there, it took an hour and a quarter to walk up it and down because of the crowds. It should have taken 20 minutes. Like, so crowded, it was unpleasant. So we're talking a lot about this over-tourism now, and we get it here. You know, the numbers are a little shaky, but the numbers of people coming into the national park are massive, and also the cost of coming and staying, in high season particularly, is just so totally inaccessible to normal people that it really worries me. I mean, it terrifies me, and it can erode the experience. Now, that can be the downside. Another great example is I was in Rome in spring this last year, and I was staying actually with friends who lived walkable to the Vatican, so I wandered over to that area of the city, and it was the day I think the Pope comes out, so I think that's a Wednesday. There must have been 30,000 people waiting outside. I mean, just so many people you couldn't move. And that, I think, is genuinely unpleasant for just about everyone. So, picking your time to travel, knowing that things will probably slow down a little bit, hopefully costs balance out, but also this is a chance to start to explore perhaps lesser known places. So in May, I finally made it back up to Yukon, the far north of Canada. Dawson City is a place I think everyone should go in their life. They just don't have big group tourism right now. So there's the kind of place you can go and really escape from the masses if you want to. Tied into that conversation is also, of course, the questions, where are my favorite places? Well, you know, just as the pandemic was slowing down, I went back down to Peru and Bolivia. I mean, countries that I just love. I will be running a trip to Peru at the end of 2025. Bolivia, I just think, is an amazing place. It's so lovely to go there. So that's always one of my favorites. But I have to say, one unique trip that I've had over the last couple of years is I finally made it to Albania, down in the Balkans, small country. Once upon a time, an incredibly oppressive so-called communist dictatorship. But the friendliness and the kindness and the warmth and the hospitality and the beauty. And what I learned about that country, something called Besa, which is an oath, where everyone is treated equally, at least in terms of faith. The only country in Southern Europe anyway, or in Western Europe, where the Jewish population grew during World War II because they were welcomed and safe in that country. So, you know, I find whether I go back to a place for the 10th time or every now and then, and I try once a year to go and visit somewhere I've never been to, but every time I learn something new, and so often it's a beautiful new thing. You know, we're living in a world that is incredibly densely populated. Another example I like to offer about population growth was over 20 years ago. I first studied Spanish in Guatemala, and I speak pretty much fluent Spanish now. And at that point, Guatemala was a country of 10 million people. Now it's 20 million. You know, that's that population press we have in the world. And so I think it's interesting because the gross statistics now are suggesting the world population is just on the precipice of falling, but it'll take a couple of generations for that to correct itself. But it does remind me that wherever I go around the world, being ethical about how we travel and trying to make connections locally is such a huge part of that travel experience. I want to give one more good example from this year. I ran a trip a few months ago to Costa Rica and Nicaragua. I love Costa Rica. I respect the country. for so many reasons. Nicaragua, I had people, which are often the case, who are nervous to go because they hear about the Sandinistas and the history of the war and so forth. And the border is unpleasant. It's like 2 hours of going through your itinerary. But once you're in that country, it is safe, kind, affordable, friendly. And on this trip, we went up a river to towns that had no road access. And what an incredible connection. And again, learning Spanish, I highly recommend because there's so many countries that you can connect with there. There's a million other places. We've already reached 20 minutes. I'm sure there's questions that can come up. Just a few other things. People say, how can you travel with me? Well, again, I put tours up where you contact me. Ideally, if you have a group. When am I getting back to Chile? Well, some of you might know I lived in Chile for just shy of a couple of years, quite a while ago, working for CUSO, kind of like the Canadian Peace Corps. I was actually setting up training for their national parks there for guiding. Can't wait to get back down. If you want to go to Easter Island, the Moai, the Heads, you have to go to Chile. And I don't know when I can get back. I can't wait. Someone asked about Thailand. I love Thailand, Sawadee Krap. I haven't been back there since pre-pandemic. I have the tour I want to do, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore. So that one's on the books as well. So much coming up. Please let me know more specific questions, and we'll try and make this a series that we can all do together. Anyway, from the Canadian Rockies here, and about minus 10 degrees. So I'm gonna go and warm up. It's so nice to connect. Thank you very much, and thank you for all your questions and being part of this community. Please get as many people as you can to subscribe to our YouTube. I would love to do half my year just on the virtual side of things.